And welcome to episode number 86 of Gar Borras' Time Machine. Wow, Gar, I can't believe we've come that far in this show, but today is a very special one, as they all are. But today, you and I decided we would talk about one of our all-time favorite classic science fiction / horror movies. The Creature from a Black Lagoon, of course, is what I am talking about.
Well, it takes me back to the 60s, boy.
Well, actually, this predates the 60s. This was 1954 when the movie originally came out, but I imagine you didn't see it till the 1960s.
Yeah, that's basically what I mean.
Yeah.
I when it actually came out, I wasn't even born yet.
You and me both. yeah.
But I wound up, being that school-age child that wound up, putting it on TV and being mesmerized by how creepy the creature looked.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up, Gar, because one of the last things that I decided to kind of look up on this was the fact that, like a lot of people first saw this film because, like you said, just simply weren't around when the film came out. A lot of people saw the film for the very first time. It said The Creature from a Black Lagoon made its TV premiere on May 19th, 1966, almost 12 years after the film was originally released, as part of a special NBC Saturday Night at the Movies to experience the movie in 3D. And in order to do so, viewers had to go to the stores and purchase the 3D glasses. Now, let's talk about that. Even these days in modern technology, how many times can you remember, in your lifetime having anything like that on TV where you had to go and get 3D glasses? I mean, usually it was, you'd have to do that, like if you went to see something in 3D at the movie theater, but usually you go to the movie theater and they'd hand out the glasses as you're entering the theater. But again, this was a special time back in 1966 because this was one of the very first films to ever be shot in 3D, so it was like a big mainstream event.
Well, it was a big deal when the movie came out because of the success of House of Wax, which was the first 3D movie that was released back in the mid 1950s, and at that time, it had a real spike in popularity in the mid 1950s when The Creature came out, because when The Creature from the Black Lagoon came out, it was the second 3D movie, and so there was just this kind of thing, where it was attracting people to want to go to the theater, to experience the 3D experience and all that kind of stuff. But then by the time it reached TV, that was a second kind of attempt at a resurgence of the popularity of 3D. And then there was a third time that there was another attempt at a resurgence at 3D, and it was in the 1980s. And I remember that, because I remember, instead of going to the theater to experience it, which was the original thing back in the mid 50s, you were doing the 3D experience by watching it on TV at home.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, there was this unique popularity of the 3D thing. And nowadays, I think VR is the new ability to do something visually where things appear to have dimension and depth and all of that kind of stuff. So it's the 3D phenomenon, kind of had was a phenomenon of its own.
Yeah, and it made the film that much more special because not every film, because it's an expensive way to have to make a movie. Um, while the audience gets that extra something special to experience it in 3D when they come to the movie theater, not every movie is made in 3D. So that's kind of what made it that much more special. Now, also, Gar, in the evolution of filmmaking, I would probably say after 3D kind of ran its course, the next evolution in filmmaking would probably be when you go and see these films now in an IMAX theater.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
and I have to admit, that going, seeing some of these, things in IMAX can be really breathtaking.
yeah,
Originally, when they were doing IMAX, it was more wildlife
yeah,
and
yeah. I remember
supposed to
that. Yeah,
be wildlife and stuff like that. Then eventually it became an extension of blockbuster movies, because now with the IMAX, it just becomes bigger than life, having depth, all kinds of dimensions that IMAX brings to it that a regular movie screen, just didn't have.
yeah,
So you can still enjoy going seeing a blockbuster movie in the original format,
yeah,
in a theater. But nowadays, they're also adding the spice of certain movies that are much more
yeah,
visually entertaining, which is not my cup of tea.
yeah, yeah,
I like to be mentally stimulated by the script and the acting and stuff like that. It's just, from what I grew up, the environment that I grew
yeah,
up
yeah, yeah.
in, which is very different than the younger generation, because the younger generations grew up in a digital world, which was completely different, and for them, the entertainment from the technology is a big part of what the younger audience enjoys.
Yeah, and I will say in
For
regards,
me,
yeah,
I've never been attracted to movies that had weak scripts
yeah,
and
yeah,
and relied on catchphrases.
yeah,
Oh, the cool line from the movie. I like movies with catchphrases, but when a movie relies on the catchphrase,
yeah.
it's the movie is relying on a bunch of other things that really doesn't have anything to do with stimulating the brain. It has much more to do with just stimulating the eye.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like that's why a catchphrase like, on happy days like Fonzie's "A." It worked because it was not something that was manufactured. The actor was kind of
Right.
developing the
And Happy
character.
Days didn't
Yeah,
rely on
yeah,
A.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? It
yeah,
wasn't their main focus. It was just an added spice.
yeah. To the show, yeah. And that's why that worked, and that's why the creature from a Black Lagoon, I think, works too. I mean, let's talk about the film itself. I mean, for a little bit, Gar, as we've often talked when discussing these Universal horror movies. The time in 1954, films were still being made in black and white. I think that gives an extra creep factor to the film and the spookiness of it. And then there's also the fact that it all throughout the movie, it's basically these actors kind of spending a day at the beach, if you will. I mean, they did not have to get too dressed up as far as what they wore throughout the film. But then you had that creep factor because of the black and white, and it was just kind of an interesting type of film.
Well, here's the thing. Uh, uh, we've had, in the history of filmmaking,
Yeah,
you go all the way back to the very beginning of filmmaking.
sure.
And part of that whole entertainment that filmmaking started included stuff that was, horror,
Yeah.
gory. And which means what my point is many societies have come and gone since the beginning of the making of movies, but society, doesn't matter where you go chronologically in the history of time.
Yeah.
Societies have always had a fascination with the creepy,
Yeah.
the dark, and all of this. So we tend to look at it as a modern thing because there's always going to be people that are going to be part of the society that are going to try to blame the ills of what's going on in society at that time on those dark things.
Yeah.
Say, for example, back in the 80s when people were trying to blame their kids committing suicide on Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah, yeah.
The same kind of thing. Ozzy represents the dark and that whole kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but society has always had a fascination with it. And it's not a new thing. It's a thing you can go 200 years in the past. 200 years. And I guarantee you, that there was the element of horror and creepy and all of that stuff as part of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even look at carnivals, because carnivals, would have that element to the carnivals that would travel from city to city, providing entertainment. Which was a real popular thing from a long time ago. A long time before we were
even alive. Yeah.
Yeah. Like hundreds of years ago.
And then
so this whole dark and dreary thing, it's not a new thing. It has been a part of the fabric of human society going all the way back to the beginning of time.
Yeah, yeah. And, going a little bit back, talking a little more about the film, that's what I found. Said the Creature from a Black Lagoon is a 1954 black and white 3D monster movie directed by Jack Arnold, who was a leading filmmaker in the 1950s. Other films he directed included It Came from Outer Space, 1953, Tarantula, 1955, and The Incredible Shrinking Man from 1957. As a horror fan yourself, Gar, were you familiar with any of those other films that I mentioned?
Oh, absolutely. Back in the '60s, I was discovering this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Through TV. In the 1960s, and of course, I was one of those people that was attracted to these dark,
pictures,
things that would wind up coming up on TV. And when you look at these movies, it's so tame.
Yeah, now
compared to what is released today.
Yeah.
But back in the 1950s, when this came out.
Yeah, in a movie theater.
Oh my gosh, the audiences were really, really scared.
Yeah, they didn't know what to make. Yeah.
This stuff really frightened people back in the 1950s. Because we always look at it now, and seeing it now is completely out of context.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to wipe all of the stuff that we know now from our memory and look at it from a blank canvas to be able to see it in the same way that people were seeing it back in the mid-1950s when it came out.
Yeah, and now this is another thing I want to ask you about, Gar, if you were aware of, because this is some new information to me. Maybe it's because of my age that I was unaware of until doing the research for today's episode. The Creature from a Black Lagoon was the first film in a trilogy which was followed by Revenge of the Creature, 1955, and The Creature Walks Among Us, 1956. Now, of course, The Creature from a Black Lagoon, which is the first film we're talking about today, that's the one that probably because it's the original gets the most heavily talked about, the most heavily advertised. Were you aware of it? There were two other creature films.
Well, yeah, but the crown jewel is the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
But here's a unique thing, because when I was a child, and I remember this, it's crazy how I can remember these things. But at the time when I had discovered it for the first time, I didn't even know what a lagoon was.
Yeah, wow. You learned it through this film.
So
yeah.
part of discovering this was the time that I learned what a lagoon was, because when I was watching it, I forgot who I was. Probably my sister. I go, what's a lagoon?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What, because I didn't even know what a lagoon was.
And besides that,
and it just, the word lagoon was such a great choice, to refer to that body of water, because they could have made a lot of other choices, but it was really, you have to kind of look at from those virgin eyes of the 1950s. That lagoon was the perfect choice because it actually worked as a hook.
Yeah.
For me, that's what got my attention. What's a lagoon?
Yeah, and Gar, the funny thing is it just adds to the horror aspect of the film. The fact that it's a black lagoon, we don't even question, why is the lagoon black? I don't know. I'd want to be diving into a black lagoon. That's something I was thinking of when I was watching the.
It's creepy from the get-go.
Yeah.
It really is.
And again, that's something maybe when you're watching the film you don't initially question. But when I was watching the film yesterday in preparation for today's episode, that's what, like, who would want to swim in a black lagoon? Why is a lagoon black? And again, getting back to the word, lagoon. From what I understand, originally when the script was written, it originally went by the name Black Lagoon, and then they added the creature once they made the movie, just because obviously it makes a lot more sense to do that. And then it said the inspiration for the creature's look was inspired by an Amazonian legend about a half-human, half-fish creature.
Well, then again, we have to look at it through virgin eyes.
Yeah.
That time period, because see, another thing that's lost nowadays is because we are so much more advanced with technology, and we know so much more. With the internet, at our fingertips. If we want to know something, we can get the answer within seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you go back in time, it was a very different time. If you didn't have that kind of access to knowledge and stuff, you would literally have to get into your car and drive to the library, because the library at that time was the internet.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
And what my point is when you're going back to this time, because we knew so much less.
Yeah.
The element of telling creepy stories had a huge amount of popularity a long time ago.
Sure.
It's the old, telling the creepy story by the campfire.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Nowadays that's become the tradition, but it has its origination.
Sure.
And the origination is from time periods a long time ago when we didn't know as much.
Yeah.
And when you go 60, 70, 80 years in the past, you could tell stories about, at a dinner party, about a race of people that's half human and half fish.
Sure.
And people would be like, what? You know, I mean, people would be drawn into that conversation.
Sure.
And it would become like this really, interesting conversation.
Sure,
But,
sure.
but see, that's the thing that existed back then. You could tell those kind of stories, and it would get people's attention. But nowadays, if you tried to tell, people would just completely blow you off because we're so much more wise now. We know so much more now.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the thing about these type of pieces of pop culture, like a creature from Black Lagoon.
Yeah, and
it brings us back to that time period where you would be telling those kind of stories, and they would have believability because
sure.
It's hard for us to for the younger generations to understand this, but societies in the past were so much more naive. You could tell these stories, and then again, it's the same thing going back to carnivals, because carnivals used to try, and they used to have lobster man.
Oh, sure.
They used to have this, and they used to have that. And it was that same element of dark and creepy and scary.
Yeah,
this is way before film, because way before film, entertainment was traveling carnival.
Yeah, and that's why too, Gar, that a film like this, being based on an Amazonian legend that dates back thousands of years ago, when none of us were there, the world was just barely being born. It makes people kind of somewhat able to believe this stuff. Like, I don't know, I wasn't around in the Amazon 1,000 years ago. Maybe there could have been a swamp creature like this. So you don't really question it. You kind of like allow yourself to believe it, as you're saying. And of course, there's no denying another aspect of this film was the Beauty and the Beast aspect. And I will go on record as saying, as far as the creature from the Black Lagoon, I don't think it was as obvious as it was, say, in King Kong from 1933. But you get midway through the film, and you start to realize, hey, the creature's got the hots for the lady scientist, and we don't question why. You know what I mean? Because I got to be honest, all through the film, my eyes were on the lady scientist as well as the creature.
Well, yes, and then you also have the element of the male lead being the hero.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Saving the day. You know what I mean? And this whole thing. And then again, it goes back to the that whole element. That the society's fascination with creepy.
Yeah.
Because or society's fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, say for example, the Black Lagoon. You're standing there and you're looking at it, and if it's black, that means you can't see anything.
Yeah.
And if you jump in that water, you have no idea what you're jumping into.
Yeah, that's part of it.
That is that element, the fear of the unknown.
Sure.
The same element that's part of Jaws.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That the fear of the unknown, going swimming in the water, and not the last thing in your mind is the shark.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But society has always had a fascination, a fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And the creature from the Black Lagoon is a classic example of that.
Sure. Now let's talk about the plot of the film, Gar. It's basically a group of scientists exploring the Amazon River, and they discover the fossilized evidence of a mysterious amphibious creature. Now, amphibious, of course, means that it can go on land and water. And when they investigate further, they come across the human version of the creature, Gillman, who becomes infatuated with the female scientist Kay Lawrence, played by Julie Adams.
And she was that classic B-movie female actress. She was in a lot of those, type of movies. But she was a busy actress at that time period. She was getting a lot of roles.
In fact, I gotta share with you, Gar, and the audience that, like I said, I was watching the film yesterday in preparation for today's interview. I got it on Blu-ray, and they had some interviews with some of the cast members, and and Julie Adams specifically was interviewed, and she shared that back in the day when she was had a contract with Universal Pictures, she said that you did not necessarily get to pick the pictures you wanted to do. They would just assign you like which picture. She said she wasn't sure about doing this one at first, but she didn't have much of a choice, and she said, "Well, this is what I would kind of became known for after doing this film, and I'm glad now that I did it." But she said back then you didn't get to choose the pictures you did. They just signed them to you and say, "Okay, we have a movie that's going to start going into production. We want you to star in it."
Well, then again, it was a very different time.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things that were going on. Male actors were afforded their input in what kind of next project that they wanted to be part of. But female actresses were not treated the same way.
Yeah.
They were basically assigned, and really didn't have much of a choice. But in reality, there were a lot of male actors that were assigned too. But the elite ones had a choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was only. That was a luxury that was only afforded to the male actors of that time period.
Yeah, another thing in addition to the 3D aspect of this movie, Gar, we should talk about is the fact that this may have been the first film or one of the first films to ever feature underwater photography. Pioneering underwater sequences were featured throughout the entire film.
Yes. And a lot of people don't know this, but there was a popular TV show that I used to watch. It was a black and white TV show that actually catapulted Lloyd Bridges into stardom.
Okay.
It was actually his first vehicle. Later on, he wound up going into movies and stuff like that. And I forgot the name of it, but it was a scuba diving show.
Okay.
And it was definitely a spin-off, from Creature of the Black Lagoon, but instead of it being horror-driven, it was more regular TV show storyline.
Okay.
Type of thing. But it also had its underwater filming sequences, which is around the same time that they had released The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So, it's not just, it in itself, it's also the birth of other TV shows that they gave, that same, let's do it to a regular TV show with regular storylines and everything. But we'll have part of it having underwater diving scenes.
And again,
and people can go back, and it was Lloyd Bridges' first a role that actually catapulted him into stardom. Before that, nobody knew who Lloyd Bridges was. And then he wound up having famous son actors.
Yeah. And of course, we should also note about what pioneering type of photography that was back in the day, underwater photography. I mean, I don't know how often they do, but I mean, just think about that, Gar. To do all these scenes underwater in the so-called Black Lagoon, I mean, you had to have cameras that not only went underwater, you had to have a bunch of the diving equipment so that the cameraman could breathe in that. You had to have other crew members go underwater.
You had to make sure that no bubbles could be seen.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
In fact,
That, even if the creature doesn't have an air tank, the filming crew does. I guarantee you, they had air tanks.
oh yeah,
And so there, I'm sure there was a lot of times that they had to wait for their own bubbles to dissipate before they could even start filming.
in fact, here's a funny story that I believe on the while we were underwater filming some of the stuff, one of the actors said that I believe it was the actor that was actually inside the creature costume. He's like, I had to go under the water and they're filming me, and he says you also got to deal with the sea life in there. And he goes, in one of the scenes we come across this huge sea turtle, and I'm in the costume, and turtle has no idea what's in front of it, and it started eating the web feet of the creature, and so they had to find the piece of a foot that the turtle had bit off to sew it back on, and then that kind of delayed that day's shooting, a couple hours just to fix the suit,
That's an interesting little piece of
trivia, yeah.
Trivia, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And then again, there's so many of these interesting things that went into the making of the film. It says the film's story reflects a 1950s fascination with evolution and prehistoric life. So again, it even gets someone into religion. What we mean by evolution is probably most of us throughout our whole life, there's a controversy over even how us humans came to being. People think we were maybe apes. Some people think we were fish, and so all throughout the film, Gar, you're even seeing the creature's footprints in the mud and the fossilized hand, and the hand comes up and all this stuff, and so without even kind of knowing as you're watching the film, it even touches a little bit on evolution because of these things that we see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then it said also radiation and atomic age fears. That was part of the this time period.
Oh man, see, you just hit on a big thing because entertainment in the 1950s was heavily influenced by the atomic age. That was the birth of the atomic age. The fear of Russia.
Yeah.
Those were two things that heavily influenced movies and entertainment back in the 50s. And people, over the years, people have lost sight of that,
yeah.
and really are completely and totally are not even aware how heavy that influence was during that time period.
Yeah, and just kind of...
It's very few movies and very few TV shows were put out that didn't have some kind of influence about that at the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it went on to say that, which you basically just touched upon, the movie blended prehistoric mythology with modern science fiction appealing to Cold War anxieties. I mean, we laugh about it now again, Gar, but kind of touching on all this, there's a time, where people actually they heard the legend of Bigfoot and they believed it, or people actually had fears of stuff like that.
See, that whole thing about telling stories about some mythical creature and it being believable.
I mean,
that goes back hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
Those stories have never been not part of our society.
I mean,
it's been enduring since the beginning of time. fascination with these creepy stories about some kind of entity that's half man and half something else.
Yeah.
And we all go ooh, and get that whole telling the horror story by the campfire, feeling the creepy and all of that stuff. That fascination is alive and well today. But it's not new. It's actually very, very old.
Yeah, and then another big aspect of the film, I don't know if you were even aware of this, Gar, is the music. And when I'm talking about, music's a big part of many movies, but specifically when talking about horror movies, it said that the famous three-note creature theme was composed by, you're not gonna believe this, it was composed by Henry Mancini, Hans J. Salter, and Herman Stein. Now, I laughed when I heard Henry Mancini because he's a famous composer, so you're not really surprised. But I was not aware that he had anything to do with this picture, until doing the research.
Well, somebody commissioned it and said, "Hey, you want some money?"
Yeah, sure.
I'll take the gig. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In fact, some of its music, like throughout this film, or a lot of horror films we've talked about doing the Time Machine and some of the past episodes, the music adds that creep factor, specifically when talking about horror movies. Gar?
Okay.
Well,
I'm not sure if I really understood.
Well, like kind of like, for example, when talking about horror, and you see and you hearing this music in the background, oftentimes it'll add to that creep factor. A great example, as we've mentioned, is like Jaws. Na 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 na.
Yeah, I mean, it's really those scenes in Jaws do not have quite the effect without that music. That music is so important to creating that anxiety that's coming. You know what I mean?
And then
music has been had that kind of effect in movies for a long time. But this is in this movie, The Black Lagoon. It's in its infancy.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
Me, when nowadays, you go back to 1954, and I'm sure it's like, oh, this is perfect. But nowadays, it's annoying as all hell.
Sure. And you mentioned, the budget. Well, the budget for this film was actually $500,000 back in the day when it was being made. That's what it cost to make this.
Well, that's 1954 for you.
Yeah.
A house could be bought for about $5,000 in 1954.
Yeah, just to put it in.
$5,000 for a house.
Yeah, put that in perspective. And another interesting thing I learned about the creature from a Black Lagoon, Gar, as we've talked in many past episodes, I mean, especially about the horror films, Universal was very big in making these monster movies, and sadly, the creature from the Black Lagoon would be the last kind of big budget monster that Universal would create. I mean, after they did the two follow-up movies to this, but after that, Universal kind of went out of the horror picture business. Not to say they never released another one, but they didn't go into developing future monsters and stuff, which is kind of sad. But I guess if you're going to go out on a bang, this is a film to do it on you, right?
Well, horror movies, it kind of go in cycles, kind of like music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There'll be a certain genre of music that will become super popular, and then it'll kind of wane, and then years later, then it becomes popular again.
Yeah.
Wane. That music is very, it's hard to predict the future because everything's changing.
Yeah.
So, but music, as we used to know it, was very cyclical. It came in cycles, and horror movies also come in cycles, because I remember in the 70s was a huge resurgence of the blockbuster horror movies. And, you have The Exorcist, you have The Omen, you just had there was a ton of these, and they were big blockbuster movies that were horror.
Yeah.
So, and then of course it's waned, and then the 80s you had another resurgence again, because you got Poltergeist,
Freddy Krueger,
and the Freddy Kruegers, but it's kind of, they kind of come and go like in cycles.
Sure, like even Universal from time to time, even just last year in 2024, they came out with a remake version, a reboot, if you will, of the classic Wolfman movie. But this one is colorized. It's got modern day actors, which is all right. And people like who are into horror movies will go see that stuff. But I think it doesn't do as well, let's say, as the classic films from Universal, for a simple fact. Those were the original monster movies. You can try to remake it and do an okay job, but it's never going to beat the original. Even the fact that the last Wolfman that they came out with last year was colorized, that's a nice maybe bonus feature for the teenagers today, but it takes away from those classic elements of those original films,
Well, I for me, the black and white horror genre that was going on in the 50s and the 60s, it really, that is a snapshot in time that will never be repeated again.
And another thing,
and I really kind of associate that whole genre with Ed Wood.
Yeah.
He's the most famous director of these B-movie, type of horror type of movies. And, I would basically say that Ed Wood would be considered the king of that whole genre of black and white horror. But The Creature from the Black Lagoon is a whole part of that whole genre, that nowadays is a snapshot in time that we can always kind of revisit, with a nostalgia lens.
Sure. And the other thing I gotta really highlight about the Universal monster movies, that date all the way back to the early 1930s, Gar, is they became so popular that Universal had its own like horror department. They had these studios where the actual, they would do the makeup and it'd take hours and hours, like putting on Frankenstein's, makeup would take like over 3 hours, or sometimes they'd have to have these monster costumes specially made, and that would take weeks at a time, and just sometimes getting it into the costume. For example, I was reading the Gillman's costume in the Black Lagoon, Creature from a Black Lagoon, was made of foam and rubber, and yet it took over 3 hours to put on the actor.
Well, things are very different. Everything was, everything's digital now.
Yeah.
And where all of these bugs have been worked out over the years.
Sure.
But back in those days, no bugs were worked out, which meant that things took so much longer because they had to do everything manually.
And a lot of times they would learn
digital element to anything back in those days.
And a lot of times they would learn stuff on the spot, like we talked about, and when we did our episode on The Wizard of Oz, the actor that played the Tin Man, he had to take some time off from shooting because of the makeup they were using on his face to make him look tin. Ran into his eye and he got an eye infection. And so again, just from that one example, they learned, we're going to have to use a different type of makeup or put it on a different way. So the actors won't get their eyes infected, you know?
Yeah, basically, those are examples of they were learning as they were going. There's
Yeah.
no manual. There's no class you can take. When all of these things were being done way back then, it was more like, hey, let's try this.
Yeah, let's see what trial and error. Yeah.
It was much more trial and error, and some things worked and some things failed.
Hmm.
Some things some things turned out unexpected and
Yeah.
got used in different other ways.
Sure.
Maybe it didn't work this way, but they discovered, oh my gosh, we can use it over here.
Yeah.
So those are all your elements of trial and error, and it really reminds me of what I went through when I tackled being in a tribute band.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is in order to do a lot of the things that you do, there is no class that you can take to learn how to do. It's all trial and error.
You step up on that stage and you see how the crowd reacts to it. Yeah.
And it's actually some of this stuff, you're actually using a live audience to try out new things and experiment with the audience, and the audience has no idea that you're even doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, see, I completely and totally relate to self-teaching and trial and error because it is the first thing that I learned that actually gave me self-confidence as a young person was when I started discovering, that I was capable of doing these things. That originally the thought of doing those things were intimidating, but I still wound up tackling it and then discovering, hey, I can actually do this.
That
is where I started. That is exactly how I learned how to play bass guitar.
Yeah.
I had a cousin that showed me a couple of very rudimentary things, they were not even close to lessons. They were just the very beginning to try to get a foothold, and then I took that and taught myself the rest.
Yeah, and then
I actually used those things, but I in reality, I taught myself how to play bass guitar.
There you go.
Once I learned how to do that, I realized, because when I first, was tackling it, I was looking at it like, this is impossible.
Yeah.
This, and it was so intimidating, to even consider trying to tackle it.
Yeah.
But once I learned how to do it, and I had that was a huge self-confidence builder for me.
I bet, yeah.
It's a thing that I carried for the rest of my life, because virtually everything else that I know how to do now, all of the things that I know, guess what? I taught myself.
There you go. Anything we're doing is, yeah.
But it really goes back to, that's exactly what they were doing way back when they were making movies, back when they were making The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It was the exact same thing, trial and error. Hey, let's try this. Hey, let's try that. Hey, maybe it doesn't work here, but oh my gosh, it'll probably work over there.
And Gar, talking about going back in a time machine and talking about all this today, I can't believe as we sit here today in 2025, this film is celebrating its 71st anniversary. I mean, It's amazing that many years has passed since the film's original release, and people are still checking it out.
Well, it's for the simple reason of nostalgia.
Sure, sure. There's
You know what I
nothing wrong.
mean?
Yeah,
It really is an important piece of nostalgia that I think that there will be a lot of people that will benefit from actually introducing that piece of nostalgia to them into their life if they haven't experienced it before.
yeah,
And that's the ultimate purpose of the time machine is either to reawaken that interest in these things
yeah.
or pique the interest.
Because
Spark that interest in somebody that knows nothing about it and might appreciate that door being open.
in fact, I got to share with the audience, Gar, that when I brought up the idea, about a month ago to you about the idea of doing today's episode, one of the first things you said to me, "Oh, I so much love that film. I would love to do that." You said, "But I wonder how many people are going to even know about the movie The Creature from a Black Lagoon, because, like I said, it's celebrating its 71st anniversary this year, which is quite a milestone. So it's getting to that point in time where there's 50% people out there that were around when the movie came out, and then there's a certain, another 50% people out there have never heard of the film, but maybe through listening to our episode, they'll say, The Creature from a Black Lagoon, that sounds pretty neat what they were talking about. I want to go check that out." I hope that's what we accomplished with today's episode.
Well, that is the intention. We have no control over how the audience is going to wind up, receiving it. But then again, here we are, Jason.
Yeah, talking about it.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're doing right now with this episode, is because we're giving it a shot and seeing how the audience, how the listeners are going to react.
Yeah.
And it's always, there are episodes that we do that, get really surprising attention.
Sure.
They like The Incredible Mr. Limpet.
Yeah.
When we were doing that episode, I did not visualize that being as heavily watched as it wound up being.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
That one had a lot of watches.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you just never know. It's all trial and error. And just like I was thinking in my mind, oh man, this is lost in the shuffle. People are going to not even remember The Incredible Mr. Limpet. And boy, was I wrong.
You just never know.
I love being wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's cases where being wrong can be absolutely awesome.
Beautiful, yeah. And finally, Gar, I got to bring up one more aspect of the film before you wrap it up today. This is a key point. I don't know if you were even aware of it when you were watching the film. The creature was designed to appear more animal than human, so the audience would have more sympathy for him and not see him so much as a monster. I mean, if you go back to the original Frankenstein in 1933, I believe it was, there's that one scene in the movie where he goes to the lake, and it's somewhat controversial, and so much to the point that they at one point when they released it on DVD, they cut that scene out of a picture. So again, even in creating these monsters, they want the audience to be able to kind of sympathize, and I think all throughout the film of The Creature of a Black Lagoon, there's a couple scenes where he does attack some of the humans because he's not sure who they are or why they're there. He's kind of scared, but while you're watching the film, you don't really think of him as a monster. You kind of start to sympathize with him,
Well, there's always that kind of element of it, the King Kong element.
Yeah.
Because that's what you just described is also the King Kong element.
Yeah.
And you by the end of King Kong, the original black and white
Yeah.
one, you feel sorry for King Kong.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's a sadness that it came to that kind of an end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, it's movies. My personal take on that is that's the movie makers experimenting with the public's emotion.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because I honestly, I think that's a trial and error thing also. And, hey, let's try this. Let's give the monster element a part that can endear the audience.
I mean,
Monster.
that's the interesting thing about some of these Universal horror flicks, especially that the more popular they became, the more it was much more than like the directors and filmmakers wanting to just terrify the audience with blood and guts and gore. First of all these classic horror films we've talked about over years, Gar, they all pretty much tell a great story. And then there are many of them, like even if you go to the modern day King Kong versus Godzilla that came out just like 2 or 3 years ago, one big aspect of that movie, you'd go see it at the box office, and then there's the ultimate question: well, who are you for? Are you for Godzilla? Or are you for King Kong? There's that element of it, and then there's the element that many people kind of found themselves feeling for both creatures.
Well, and it's that's an element.
Yeah.
Where I think it was a stroke of genius for the filmmakers, because I'm sure that was a trial and error thing.
Sure.
Hey, let's try this, and what I mean by that is let's try a Clash of the Titans, Godzilla against King Kong. And really what that is, that's derived from is that same public fascination with heavyweight boxers.
Sure. Yeah.
And that same public fascination that they have with heavyweight boxers is the same element that gravitated to King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah,
and the same thing that makes people gravitate toward wrestling, because everybody that watches wrestling knows that it's not real, but it's a clash of the titans.
And then what you're talking about too, it goes way beyond just having a winner and a loser. It's more about, even like you get into some of these Marvel and DC movies like Superman that just came out, you have the hero versus the villain. And so even King Kong versus Godzilla, people are asking, okay, which is the hero and which is the villain? That's ultimately for the audience member to decide.
Because I think the audience, because I'm from that time period, automatically, because the original King Kong had such an endearing effect at the end.
Yeah.
Where everybody felt sorry for King Kong
at
the end. That automatically made the audience view King Kong as the good guy.
Yeah.
That element automatically made the public view King Kong that way.
Yeah.
So there was the good guy, and then there was the bad guy too. Yeah. Because look at Godzilla. There was nothing appealing about Godzilla, and what came out of his mouth? Fire. Yeah. There's not too
many people.
So there's nothing endearing to make you feel sorry
for Godzilla.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. And the final point we'll make here, Gar, in wrapping this up for today, the film had, this is interesting, again, going back to the time when it was made in the 1950s, the film had no female writers or producers, and yet its creature is obsessed with Kay, and Kay, the female scientist, and that kind of set the standard for future Beauty and the Beast horror type stories.
Well, it's kind of cyclical too.
Yeah.
Coming and going.
Yeah.
But that's just I would put it as just part of that cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think would be a great double kind of feature horror night would be the original King Kong and this movie, Gar, because it's funny that we talk so much also about King Kong throughout today's episode, and I think that's a simple fact that both these films, well, it may not be obvious, have a lot in common, especially the Beauty and the Beast kind of aspect of the films,
Yeah, they're so different though.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But I completely agree.
Yeah.
That the pairing of those two, bust out the popcorn and turn off the light.
Yeah.
And I'm in.
Yeah, there you go. This was a real fun episode of Dugar. It's going to go up next Saturday now. I got to share with people that when you and I get together in 2 weeks from now, we're finally going to get around to doing one we've been wanting to do for really since the inception of the show. And I'm talking about the classic sitcom from the 80s, Married with Children. And the reason for that, I say that, Gar, is I cannot tell people how many episodes you and I have done over the years of The Time Machine where you have brought up what a kind of what a just a not just a wonderful TV show, but it was a major hit, like for launching this Channel 11 that we have here in Los Angeles.
It has everything to do with the success of Channel 11.
Yeah.
Because before Married with Children, Channel 11 was a channel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was not really considered, a channel to go to.
Yeah.
For entertainment, it just really wasn't. And then once Married with Children, people literally went from, barely watching Channel 11 to, religiously watching that show.
And then, of course, Married with Children even predates, the Simpsons being on that channel. And
it gave the birth to the Simpsons.
Yeah.
Because the Simpsons actually made a guest appearance. The very first birth of the Simpsons was being shown on that.
Wow.
So it's actually responsible for giving the birth to the Simpsons.
Yeah. We'll get into it next episode, but I dare say also that, as you often like to say, a word that has often come up in past episodes, trailblazers, visionaries. That's just, and then of course, let's be honest, Gar, and we will get into it next episode. But without Married with Children, I don't think you even ever had the Roseanne show that was on ABC years later.
Well, yeah, because it was the birth of the dirty, ugly side of
life.
family.
There you go. That's
but making it endearing.
Yeah.
Because you can't just have it just showcase the dirty, ugly side of family life. There has to be an element that draws the audience, and that element is it being endearing.
Because again, Gar, as much
That's an actual thing that actually works as a glue.
Yeah.
That draws the audience in. If you don't have that, you don't have a successful show. But I actually predict that the Married with Children one that we're going to record next is going to be a high traffic one. I really, I really would like to be right about this.
Yeah.
But I just have a feeling that there are so many people that really love that show.
Because I dare
the birth of that whole genre.
I dare you walk up to anybody and ask about Married with Children, and I guarantee, no matter their age, they're gonna know that show, even if they caught it in reruns. And I will say this, and then we will truly wrap it up, Gar. But we will really get into it next week. But what I think made a show like Married with Children so endearing is, as much as I liked the Brady Bunch, Al Bundy was the complete opposite of Mike Brady. For example, you didn't hear Al Bundy tell his son, Well, son, as long as you know what you did was wrong, I think that's punishment enough, and we will end it there. Yeah.
Oh, that really works in real life.
Yeah. We wish it did, right?
Oh, every kid wishes their parents would deal with those kind of issues in that way.
Yeah.
You know, they get away with murder.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're inviting. Is you're inviting your kids to see how far they can go with getting away with things.
Yeah. Okay, Gar. Well, you take care, buddy. This is another great episode in the can.
Absolutely.
Hey, Gar.